All right, so today we're going to be taking a look at equations of lines, and these are special lines. So we're going to be taking a look at horizontal and vertical lines and what happens when we're doing equations for those lines. So we're going to start with horizontal lines here. You can see we've got a horizontal line in red on the graph, and we're going to use y equals mx plus b to find the equation of that horizontal line. So when we talk about the slope of this line, for those of you who I taught last year, we talked about the slopes of these special lines, and we talked about if you were skiing or snowboarding on this hill, what would happen. And so the speed of the skier on this hill that's a flat hill is going to be 0. So the slope of a flat line is 0. And the y-intercept, so where it crosses the y-axis, is at 2. So if we were going to write the equation of the line using y equals mx plus b, it would be y equals 0 times x plus b is 2. And 0 times x is just y equals 2. So that would be the equation of that line. Another way you may want to consider it is, if you look at that red line there, every y value on that line, so if we talk about each of these points on that line, every point has a y value of 2. So y is always equal to 2. Another way I like to consider the these special lines is to come up with the equation. You need to answer 2 questions. So which axis does the line pass through? So this line passes through the y-axis. So that's going to be a y. Where does it pass through the y-axis? It's passing through the y-axis at 2. And the equation of that line is y equals 2. So whichever of those methods you prefer to come up with the equation, that's what the equation of a horizontal line is going to be. Y equals, and then whatever value it crosses the y-axis at. Now let's take a look at the vertical situation. So again, those of you that I taught last year, we talked about downhill skiing or snowboarding on this hill. Now, if you were crazy enough to snowboard on this hill, by the time you hit the bottom of the hill, you will be undefined. And that's the slope of that line, because it's a vertical line. There's no actual slope to it. It's so such a steep slope that it's undefined. And the y-intercept is none, because it never crosses the y-axis. So it's kind of hard to come up with the equation of that line using y equals mx plus b. Typically, we just forget about y equals mx plus b when we're working with vertical and horizontal lines. So if we compare what we did last time, every point on this line has the same x value. X is always -3 on that line. So the equation of this line is x equals -3. And if we use the method that I did at the end up above there, so which axis does this line cross? So this line is crossing the x-axis, and it passes through the x-axis at -3. So the equation of this line is x equals -3. Now, in these situations, if we wanted to change this to standard form, remember we want everything on one side equal to 0, and the x coefficient has to be positive. So x is positive right now, so I'm going to leave the x on the left side. I would bring the -3 to the other side, and it would change to -3. So in standard form, I would write it like this. Okay, let's take a look at some more examples. So, questions that you may get that involve horizontal and vertical lines. Find the horizontal line that goes through 2, -3. So imagine if I plotted this point on a graph. And I would suggest that it's a good idea to just sketch a little picture of it. It doesn't have to be a perfect graph, but if I plot where that point is, so say that's 2 and -3. So I have a point here, and I want to draw a horizontal line that goes through that point. So if I drew a horizontal line, it would look like that. And that line is crossing the y-axis at -3. So that's the equation of the line. If we wanted to write that in standard form, we would write y plus 3 equals 0. Okay, the next one, example 2. Whoa, let me undo that guy. I don't think I want to use that line for my axis. So I'll sketch a picture of this one. This one is going through the point 5, 7. So if I count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have to go through this point, and I want a vertical line. So go back to my red line here. So I want a vertical line, vertical straight up and down, and it's going through that point. So it's there. So it is crossing the x-axis at 5. So x equals 5 is our answer there. In standard form, it would be x minus 5 equals 0. Okay? Now, in this one here, when I want to find the equation of the line that goes through 2 points, usually what I would do is I would start by finding the slope. So I would do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And in this case, I would get 5 minus 5 on the top. So I'm subtracting these two y's on the top. And on the bottom, it would be 6 plus 2. But you notice what happens. I get a 0 in the numerator. Now, why do I get a 0? I get a 0 because y is always equal to 5 there. So the equation for this line is y equals 5. So if you notice that as soon as you get your 2 points here, that, hey, both y's are exactly the same, then you can just write y equals 5. If you try and calculate the slope and you get a 0 in the numerator or the denominator, then go back and check your points and figure out which value is always the same. In this case, it's y equals 5. Okay, so here we're going to find the equation of the horizontal line and the vertical line that goes through -4, 2. So you can see we've got, there's the point, -4, 2. And we've got a green line here that's horizontal. The green line is crossing the y-axis at 2. And the red line, the vertical line, is crossing the x-axis at -4. So those are the equations of those two lines that go through the point -4, 2. These questions are so much better if you can look at a picture of what it is to help come up with the equation. And then sometimes you're going to be given the equation and you have to graph it. So in the first one, we have x equals -2. So this means it's going to cross the x-axis at -2. So if I go to -2 on the x-axis, I need to put a line that's going to cut the x-axis at -2. So that's what x equals -2 looks like. In the second one, you can see the y isn't by itself. I'm actually going to rewrite it so that it's y equals 5. So on my graph, I have to go where on the y-axis at 5, and I need to put a line that crosses the y-axis at 5. So that's going to be the line that is y equals 5. All right, the next one, I'm going to get x by itself. So when I move the -2 to the other side, it becomes +2. So I need to draw a line that crosses the x-axis at 2. So if I draw a line that crosses the x-axis at 2, the equation of that line is x equals 2. And the last one here is y equals 7. So I go on the y-axis to the point 7. So I need to draw a line that goes through that point. Goes through the y-axis at 7. So that equation is going to be y equals 7. Okay, so we'll have an opportunity to practice this tomorrow in class. Thanks.